Hello, hi everyone. Welcome back to Woo Can Cook. My name is Wesley, and this is a show where we are slowly cooking our way through all of the food from my childhood. Today we're diving back into our series dedicated to Chinese dim sum and breakfast food classics, with a shot at pretty much the very first thing that I look for on the dim sum carts any chance that I get, which is the Chinese steamed and fried turnip cake, or lieu Bai Gao. For those unfamiliar, a Chinese turnip cake, as you might have guessed, prominently features a shredded and steamed Chinese turnip that has been mixed with an assortment of meats and veggies, then steamed into a solid form and finally sliced and pan-fried for a crispy exterior texture. Those following along with this series may know that the lieu Bai Gao has many different popular variations on the same theme, most of which make use of different forms of starchy root veggies. Some time ago we did a purple tinged version using taro root, and in fact for today's version, in lieu of turnips, we're going to be making use of these gorgeous daikon radishes that I found at the farmer's market, which are also a very common substitution as well. Most iconically, however, the lieu Bai Gao must include two ingredients, the first being dried Chinese lapchang sausages, and the second being rice flour. This would be the same stuff used to make things like mochi, which of course means that it's going to give our turnip cakes a similarly wonderful chewy, sticky, and bouncy texture. Okay, so let's get into it. Alright, so diving right in, I'm starting things off with some hopefully familiar looking veggies that come up in most of our savory Chinese dishes for their baseline umami qualities. This is 4 cloves of crushed and minced garlic to start, followed by 1 inch or about 1 tablespoon of fine minced ginger, and 3 green onions that I'm separating by their whites and greens, then slicing the whites up thinly for our stir fry and reserving the more delicate greens to go into our turnip cake raw later on. Then next, rounding out our veggies, this is 4 shiitake mushrooms that I'm rehydrating in boiling water for about 15 minutes. This water, by the way, is filled with umami and is incredibly useful for things like braises and sauces. However, unfortunately, I have no real use for it today though. Once these are nice and tender, I'm dicing these up and setting aside while we move on to our lapchang sausage, which I'm going to be dicing up as well. For those not familiar, lapchang is a Chinese sweet and savory dried sausage that you'll commonly find in vacuum-sealed packages to make them pantry stable. In Chinatown, they're also one of the things that you'll often see hanging in the butcher shop windows next to the Peking ducks and chassu pork. The sausages that we're using today are made from pork and chicken, although you'll often find versions made with organ meat, so read your packaging carefully with these if you don't like liver. Finally, last up, rounding out our prep work, is our root veggie, which today is going to be this gorgeous daikon radish that I basically bought at the farmer's market last weekend without really knowing how I was going to use it because it just looked so pretty. Spirited Away, anyone? Anyway, I'm removing the root and tip ends here, then peeling and slicing in half so that we may grate this all up. If you're feeling fancy, you can also reserve some of your daikon and slice it into cubes to toss in whole, which would not be too uncommon. Sort of like a smooth versus chunky mashed potato. Whatever your fancy is, you do you. Over on the stove, I'm starting off by adding a cup of water to my wok here over medium heat, then combining with my shredded daikon and letting this simmer for 5 minutes until nice and tender. Then moving on to our filling next, we're removing our daikon, reheating, adding 4 tablespoons of peanut oil, and as always, long yao for that nice non-stick surface. Going in here first are my aromatic veggies. Here's my garlic, ginger, and the whites of my green onions going in, which I'm sauteing for about 15 seconds until nice and fragrant. Then next I'm following this up with my diced lapchang sausage, which I'm tossing for 2 to 3 minutes until some of that fat in our sausage starts to render out. This is going to add some nice pork fat to our turnip cake later on. Finally, I'm adding in my shiitake mushrooms and then tossing briefly for about 1 minute until combined, then removing this all from heat and heading back over to the cutting board while we assemble our turnip cake next. Back over on the cutting board, I have my largest mixing bowl out. Then I'm combining my daikon, cooked filling, and the greens of my green onions with our binding agents. This today is going to be a single cup of glutinous rice flour plus a quarter cup of cornstarch. Now, once again, the rice flour that I'm using today is glutinous rice flour, which again is the same stuff that is used to make mochi. This of course means that it's going to create more of a chewy and sticky texture to our lieu Bai Gao due to the textural qualities of glutinous rice flour. I have also seen other recipes make use of regular rice flour. This is also what we used in our taro cake version too, which yields a more dense and cake-like texture instead. Personally, I prefer the former, but once again, adjust to your own preferences here. Once we have this all mixed to combine, I'm liberally oiling a heat-proof loaf pan before adding in my turnip cake, then giving a few taps on the countertop to dislodge any errant air pockets left behind. Back over on the stove, I have a steam basket set up in my tallest stock pot with a few inches of boiling water rolling underneath it. Then we're gonna place our loaf pan right on top of our steam basket and cover this up to steam for a whopping 60 minutes. If you've got an Instapot, this might be a good time to make use of it to cut down on some of the cook time here, but otherwise, if not, I'd recommend doing this in the winter when you can capitalize on some free heating. In any case, an hour later, I'm removing this from heat, then letting it cool down before popping it in the fridge for 4 hours or more, ideally overnight, so that everything has a chance to set. The following morning, I'm using a spatula here to dislodge the sides of my loaf pan, then saying a little prayer before flipping this over and... whew, nice. Finally, now what you should be using here is a wet serrated knife to slice these into pieces. Our lieu Bai Gao is very sticky at this point, so my chef's knife is definitely struggling here. Over on the stove, I have my wok heating up over medium heat, then I'm adding 4 tablespoons of peanut oil and giving 1 more long yao before adding in my cake pieces and frying for 2 minutes per side until golden brown. Fair warning, if you have used glutinous rice flour like I did here, these things are going to be quite sticky, so flipping them without breaking them is going to be quite a challenge. In any case though, I'm topping this off with a spoonful of chili oil and a side of soy sauce, and we're ready to eat. Okay, so I'll be the first to admit that a lieu Bai Gao is one of those dishes that is generally just really difficult to make look attractive. Any way that you turn it or point it, and it's still a weird looking fried cake. Personally, if you ask me though, this is also why there's always some of these left on the dim sum carts anytime that you flag the waiters down. The texture of our cake is unlike anything I have ever come across in any other dish, mainly because the steam to our daikon causes it to become both extremely tender on the interior, but also perfectly crispy and crunchy on the exterior layer thanks to our pan fry. Sort of like a McDonald's hash brown, but with sausages inside. What's not to like about this? Then to round this out, I'll say it again, but I really do think that glutinous rice flour is the way to go with a lieu Bai Gao. The chewy and tacky qualities that it lends to our cakes are really the perfect complement to the array of crispy and tender textures that come from our steamed and fried daikon, which I love. Finally, the last bit that I'll mention is that this stuff also refrigerates and freezes really well too, so if you've got some extras left over, I highly recommend setting it aside for a quick breakfast meal that you can probably fry up faster than a pancake, I think. Okay, so that's it everyone. I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you give this one a shot. For those who are new to the channel, this one is part of a larger series dedicated to classic Chinese dim sum breakfast food, so definitely check out that series next if you haven't yet, because there's a lot of these. For the Bay Area locals, the Wu Can Cook fried rice pop-up is now at Wonders Brewing in Emeryville every Thursday through Sunday, so come by and say hi if you can. More about that at wucancook.com/eats. As always, like, comment, subscribe, share, be nice interneters, and I'll see you soon.